Ooh, that voice is always anxiety-inducing, but we do like to be reminded that we are indeed successfully recording. I see friends joining us, which we love to see. So excited for today's special edition of The Lunchroom. Julia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. I slept really well.
That's really important. Mental health and like bodily wellness is so important. So I'm glad to hear that.
Right? How are you?
I'm doing all right. I did not sleep as well. My dog loves to dance in his sleep, so there was a little fun with that. But you take it all in stride, and today's a beautiful day, and I'm so happy to be here in the lunchroom with you and our guests.
Me too.
So welcome everyone. I see some folks joining, so I'm going to introduce myself, review a little bit of Zoom housekeeping and some additional critical information before I pass it on to Julia and then our guests. I am Sarah Schofield-Manser. I am A.R.T's Assistant Director of Special Events and Programming. I use the she series of pronouns. I am a white woman with dark brown hair. Today I'm wearing a sweater and glasses because they are new, and I'm really trying to lean into wearing glasses rather than my usual contacts 18 hours a day, which cannot be healthy for anyone. The sweater is cream colored and it's got some little knit buttons on it, so it has a little bit of fun texture. I'd like to acknowledge that I am today calling in from the unceded territory of the Pentucket, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, and that the land that the Loeb Drama Center occupies is the unceded territory of the Massachusetts peoples. A few bits of Zoom housekeeping as promised. You will notice that the chat is disabled, so I will be sending out some fun, helpful links and information to you as our audience via the chat, but you will be unable to communicate back using the chat feature. If you'd like to submit questions for our guests and for Julia, we encourage you to do so using the Q&A feature, which can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's like a little talk bubble. It'll say Q&A. Type out your question. We're reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes to address any and all audience questions. Finally, if you could benefit from use of closed captioning, you can turn that on by looking again at the panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Depending on the edition of Zoom you should have, there should be a little button that has a 3-dot icon and says more. If you click that, it should give you an option to either show full transcript or show subtitle. Again, it depends on how updated your Zoom is, but if you'd like to follow along with captions, they will be available under the More button. Two more little quick things to touch on. One is very important and one is just very warm and happy and also very important. You might notice that our typical host, Mark Lunsford, is not with us today, but I would like to have him join the lunchroom in spirit. It is Mark Lunsford's birthday. So all of you stay at home watching, please send him a little love today. We hope that he is celebrating and having a great day off, resting, relaxing, and preparing for the year ahead. So happy birthday, Mark. We adore you and we miss you in the lunchroom. And last, most importantly, and certainly not least, I would like to read a statement that we read at the top of every virtual event regarding A.R.T's policies and commitment to anti-racism. The A.R.T is unequivocally opposed to hate. We center anti-racism as a core value. And we expect everyone in the A.R.T community, including our audiences, to uphold these values. And as such, we will not tolerate anti-Blackness or racism of any kind in our buildings, nor at our online events. We aim to create the environment that is uninhabitable to racism and to discrimination, where all BIPOC staff, artists, volunteers, audience, and community members are seen, heard, valued, and provided the opportunity to thrive. This work is only possible when we do it together. So thank you for being our partner in it. I'll give a little space for that statement to sink in for everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Julia, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you'd like to do a little self-intro before I hop off camera.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. You're so good at that every time. I'm always like watching like a proud parent.
No, thank you. It's rehearsed, I promise you.
And yes, happy birthday, Mark. I feel like, Mark, this is your worst nightmare that we're doing this, but too bad. You're wonderful. And hello, I am Julia Schachnik. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the community organizing manager at the A.R.T, where I have been for 3.5-ish years, happily. And as a community organizing manager, I work with community partners to uplift their work, respond to their needs, and create engagement programming at the A.R.T. And I want to do 3 little fun facts if you haven't met me yet. Are they fun? We'll see. First fact, I'm a water baby, which means I will be in the ocean forever. Like you have to drag me out of it. I don't care if the water is freezing or super hot. I want to live in the ocean all the time. Second fact, thank you, right? I am a Leo, summer birthdays. Maybe that's why. Second fact, I am the first American citizen in my family. I'm from a Brazilian family, grew up in Brookline, which is about 30 minutes from the A.R.T. And last fact, if I could talk about anything for the rest of my life, it would be my cat, Steven. I'm obsessed with him. I adopted him in the pandemic, and if you see the door behind me open, it's Steven coming in to join us. To do a physical description, I'm a light-skinned Latina woman. I have dark brown curly hair. I'm wearing some gold hoops and my favorite leopard print sweater, and I am zooming in from my bedroom. And I am calling in also from the unceded land of the Massachusetts people in Brooklyn. Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to go off camera. Love having you here. Hope to see Steven make a little guest appearance, and I will be back at the end to help with Q&A.
Thank you, Sarah. So enough about me. Let's get into the good stuff. I am so excited to be having a conversation with two wonderful community leaders and advocates here in Cambridge and Greater Boston. So I want to invite in Cameron Van Fossen, who is the Executive Director of Y2Y, and Ari Barbanel, the Executive Director of Winter Walk. You want to come in, turn your cameras on, unmute. Yes, look at those beautiful faces. Welcome, welcome. How are you feeling? How are we doing?
Happy
Feeling
to be
good.
here.
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought we could start with intros if you want to introduce your names, your pronouns, titles, and then go into more about your work and your organizations to share the amazing work that you do with our audiences. So we can kick off with Ari, who I know began with us at the A.R.T. and worked at Oberon and transitioned to a different side of nonprofit work. You want to kick us off, Ari?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ari Barbanel. I'm the Executive Director of the Winter Walk, and my pronouns are she, her. And it is true. In my past life, I was at the A.R.T. for about 10 years. So hello to my wonderful A.R.T. family. And I am proud now to have been with the Winter Walk since its founding in 2016. We are an initiative raising awareness towards an end to homelessness in the greater Boston area. And we do that through year-round education, advocacy, and outreach. And we work to break stigma, change perceptions. We think that breaking down how you think about homelessness and changing it is really the gateway to systemic change. And then we also culminate in an annual event. It happens every year in February outside the coldest month of the year, rain, snow, or shine, where we gather shoulder to shoulder, housed and homeless, to lift our voices and make a big change until we never have to walk together again, which is the goal.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ari. So Cam, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Julia. Hi, I'm Cameron Van Fossen. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm the Executive Director of Y2Y Network. I'm calling in from the stolen land of the Massachusetts people in Jamaica Plain. And Y2Y Network is a homeless shelter for young adults ages 18 to 24, operating in a young adult to young adult model, which we love and are really proud of. We also aim to provide uniquely affirming, inclusive, and age-appropriate services to our young people. We're also the only gender-neutral shelter in the state. Our work is broken out into 3 pillars, which are advocacy. So we support our young people in legislative advocacy. We also support them in accessing pathways out of homelessness. And then our emergency shelter, which operates every night, is what we call our sanctuary program. And those are our 3 pillars.
Wonderful. So Cam, I know you started this new role at kind of a really iconic time to start a new job and move to a new place, which is a few weeks before the pandemic began in 2020, right?
Yes, that's true. I moved in February. I just was thinking about this. So it's 2 years ago, almost to the day, that I moved to Boston, and I started a month before the pandemic hit.
So I've been wondering, just with this great, horrible connector of the pandemic, how that might have affected your work and the people that you both work with, knowing, Cam, that it's really what began your time with Y2Y.
Yes, absolutely. So as soon as I came on, I had kind of like all of these goals and dreams for what I wanted to do in the role as executive director related to strategic planning for the organization and programmatic improvements and all of this great stuff. But it all got pushed back because of the kind of crisis management mode that we went into right away. So really early on in the pandemic, students were sent home. We are a young adult operated shelter, so we rely on young adults ages 18 to 24 as volunteers to operate the space. And we lost access to those young people. So really quickly, we realized that even if we're not able to be in our young adults to young adult model, our priority obviously is our guests and keeping them safe and sheltered. So we iterated our model to be able to continuously operate in the context of the pandemic, and we didn't close any nights. So we did that by hiring on some professional staff members. We first had a contract with a professional staffing agency, and then we were able to hire folks onto our own payroll. And we lost access to our apprenticeship model. So in our model, older young adults mentor younger young adults to be able to operate the space. But we were able to keep our young adults who normally run the space engaged remotely. We received really incredible support from the city of Cambridge to operate as their response to youth homelessness in the context of the pandemic. And we couldn't have done it without them. Our partner at Harvard, Phillips Brooks House Association was really supportive. So we were able to bridge through the hardest part of the pandemic. And now we have students fully back in the space. And we're back in a young adult to young adult model.
Wonderful. Yes. And Ari, I know Winter Walk is an outdoor event, so it's COVID proof in that way, but you did add some virtual options. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually last February, we went all virtual. Even though it's an outdoor event, it was still the height of things. But we found people far more connected to the work than ever before. And COVID will never be a blessing in disguise, but I do think that it did create an environment where people were a little more understanding of how thin the line is between being housed and homeless. There were a lot of people in our community who were dealing with economic impacts of COVID and saying, I never thought this could happen to me. How can I get more involved? So that was a really wonderful moment to spread the word even farther. But mostly we buckled down and helped our partners out where they needed help. The impact on every one of our partner organizations, including Y2Y, was so massive that we were trying to help organizations that had increased outreach for food and warm clothing and things like that, that we could help enhance. But this year we're back to live for our February event. Woo-hoo! We also have a remote option for those who are joining from farther away or anyone who is not quite ready to gather in a big group, even outside. So we are accommodating everyone we possibly can this year.
Yes. And Ari, I was just thinking when you're talking about, blessings in disguise and some things that have been amplified during the pandemic, like empathy and this focus on community. Something I've been really interested in is this shift in how we think about self-care and how pre-March 2020, it was this sort of frivolous thing. You added it on in the weekends if you had time, but we never prioritized it. And in the pandemic, with this immense pressure and all these struggles that we're going through, we realize if we don't prioritize ourselves and our needs and our health, we can't actually show up and sustain our work and the way we were working before the pandemic and living. I know for myself and working in community, it really became clear to me, if I don't prioritize my needs, not just the baseline, but finding time for joy and rest, I can't show up for my community. So wondering just how your relationship to self-care might have changed in the pandemic and how it's affected your industry and your work.
Yeah, what a great question. Thank you. I think especially given our, right now we have 10 partners as the Winter Walk, 10 service providers covering all areas of homelessness. And the impact on all of them has been so intense, emotional. And one thing I think that I've seen that I want to lift up and share is one of our partners, Boston Healthcare for the Homeless Program, which is an amazing organization in and of itself, but also has connection and reach to all 10 of our partners. So Y2Y works with them. Everyone we work with has some connection there. And they actually implemented this year a staff member on staff managing the health, the mental health of their team members. The work that these service providers do is already intense, and then add the COVID pandemic to that. And so I think that kind of attention as an organization to self-care and the needs of your community is amazing. shameless plug, the staff member actually used to work at Oberon as a bartender back in her younger days. So all roads lead back to the A.R.T.
We try.
And, as the Winter Walk, we are not a service provider directly. We provide service through our work with other organizations. So we have deep roots in the homeless community, and we are we're lucky to be able to be there wherever we can for each other. And so I'm grateful. I think my self-care is the care outwards. And so for me, that's been how I approach it in the last 2 years.
Wonderful. What about you, Cam?
My self-care practices are things like meditation, reading. I spend a lot of time outdoors. But to Ari's point, we've worked really hard this year to make strides to make Y2Y a better place to work. And so we know that in the context of the homelessness provider landscape, it's really, really challenging work. And there's kind of lots of associative trauma that our staff incur by doing the work. And so we've made a lot of structural improvements to our organization. And we started out with a really great structure as an organization in this regard, but we provide unlimited PTO. We're really generous in terms of salaries and benefits. We've increased the percentage of staff that are BIPOC folks and trans and gender nonconforming folks by 40% since my tenure. We also have implemented no meeting Tuesdays. So it's one of the work days a week where we don't take any meetings and we all have kind of time to do deep work and think really critically about kind of our big projects. And then we also have a 4-day work week a month as of the pandemic that we've implemented in order to better care for our staff. So it's really important to me as a leader to support people who are going to be able to be in this work for a really long time. And I know that folks can't do that without having the necessary supports at this moment in time. And so, that's just like something that's really important to us at Y2Y.
Wow. Okay. 4-day work week once a month and no meeting Tuesdays. And Ari, you were saying to have a staff member who's just dedicated to this. Everyone take note of these because these are genius. Those are genius. I'm going to write that down. Bring it back to the A.R.T. We'll see. But that's wonderful. I know for myself, I've been thinking about what my self-care as it relates to work is, and I will share my tip that I recently discovered for myself. I no longer make to-do lists in the morning because when I was making them in the morning, when I have my energy, I'm filling up my list and then I get to the end of the day, then I've got like 2/3 I didn't get to, and I feel bad about myself and I bring it to the next. So I make them at night when I'm already tired and I'm like, as long as I get these 30 things, it's good. And it's helped a lot. So I share that with you, little ways to avoid burnout. But thank you both for sharing those because that was fantastic. I'm wondering, so people who work with particularly under-resourced and underserved communities, we often encounter a lot of misconceptions and stigmas about the work we do and the people we work with. And I know with my work at the theater, a lot of my work has begun with diversifying our audiences. And there's the stigma that theater is for white audiences and that people of color just don't enjoy theater. They enjoy other types of art. And I know, I'm a Latina woman, I know that that's not true. There's so many of us who love theater and want to go, but just don't feel welcome. And overcoming that stigma can be such a huge obstacle in creating the joy-filled work that I want to do. So wondering for the two of you, what sort of misconceptions or stigmas you often encounter that you'd want to dispel for our audience?
Yeah, there are a lot around homelessness already. And then we work with a young population who are super diverse in terms of gender, sexuality, and race and ethnicity. So our young people are really living at complex intersections of oppressed identity. And I think, it's been interesting to watch national discourse around the need to serve young adults experiencing homelessness in a more organized way. That's been like really encouraging over the last, I'd say like 7-ish years. But as we know, there are still, incredible structural barriers to self-sufficiency for young adults experiencing homelessness, especially when they are also being discriminated against because of their race, or gender or sexual identity. And one of the main root causes for folks coming to Y2Y is escaping an unsafe home situation, aging out of foster care, or being kicked out of their home because of their sexual or gender identity. Another thing that I think is a little like under discussed around stigma in youth homelessness is just ageism and youth stigma. And it's really so deeply, it's really like endemic in our culture to create power dynamics between youth and adults, and just think it's so deeply ingrained in every system and structure in our society that youth should be learning from adults, and adults know more than young people. And that has never been my experience in my many years of working with young people. And they just have such a wealth of knowledge and such a freedom from still some freedom from internalization of kind of these things that society tells us we should internalize to be like acceptable, respectable adults. And there's so much that we can learn from them. So I think taking a really hard look as a society at the ways in which we stigmatize youth and just being young is really important. And then around just homelessness in particular, I think a really encouraging movement is that I've been seeing is around this concept that homelessness is not an identity. It's a kind of like period of life. And hopefully, you know, our goal at Y2Y is to exit young people from the cycle of homelessness permanently. So, and that's a lot of how our space, our physical space, which was designed by young people who have lived experience in homelessness. Our program is designed to be iterative to respond to the changing needs and desires of young people experiencing homelessness. And that is a lot about reinstilling dignity, power, autonomy to our young people, helping them remember that they are the ultimate experts in their own well-being, in their own decision-making, and that there is a community of people that they're a part of that honors, sees them, and respects them for things not related to the experience of homelessness that they're enduring at this time.
Mm. Oh, wondering. I was just looking at you, Ari. So
no, I think
I just
you know, I want to amplify what Cam said, because I think that's the mission of the Winter Walk in its entirety. This idea that homelessness is not an identity; it is hopefully a temporary state of being, and that is exactly what we are trying to get out there for all areas of homelessness. That if we can break down this idea that homeless is one thing, that you can put a blanket over homelessness, and instead look at the different root causes for our different homeless communities, and then change how you think about it, that we can really make a difference. So I think for us, it's all about breaking stigma, and I think that's the real key point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kim, I was thinking, you were talking about this misconception that young people don't know what's best for themselves. And wondering if you can talk about this great initiative that you mentioned, Baycash, and how that helps to break down that stigma.
This is the thing that I could talk about forever. Earlier, you mentioned Stephen. So
yes,
yes, happily. Baycash is Boston's first unconditional cash transfer program for homeless youth. Y2Y Network has been on the ground level of organizing as one of the core partners in this initiative, and we also serve as the fiscal agent for Baycash. So what it means is that we'll be providing, the program will provide funds directly given to young people experiencing homelessness for them to utilize to navigate the barriers that they're experiencing to housing and to self-sustainability, with no conditions placed upon how they use the funds. So we're not requiring them to prove they used it for a certain purpose or anything like that. However, they will have extremely intensive support that they're able to opt into to navigate how they want to use those funds, and to help them strategize around kind of dealing with the barriers that they are facing. And the reason for this approach to this project is that it really inverts more paternalistic structures of philanthropy that are common practice in the sector, in the nonprofit sector, whereby wealthy folks, usually based on data, so I don't mean that as an indictment in any way, but make choices about how they think funds are best used to solve social issues like that of youth homelessness. And what this project is designed to do is to say, all true knowledge originates in direct experience, and the people who know the most about the barriers they're facing to self-sustainability and to housing are the people experiencing homelessness. And so, and to honor youth experience and youth wisdom as well. That's a big piece of this. It's being piloted in 6 cities simultaneously. And there's a research study, a longitudinal research study that accompanies it, that is run out of Chapin Hall, the foremost kind of entity studying youth homelessness out of the University of Chicago. And the hope is that in the long term, this project will be adopted by public entities at the state level and will be funded in perpetuity moving forward once we have some data showing how effective it's been. It's really exciting and still a little bit controversial for some folks, just the concept of this trust. But I think we're at such an important moment in the national discourse around identity, around dignity, and honoring expertise and lived experience, that it's like the perfect time to move in this direction, as we see other unconditional cash transfer and direct cash transfer programs on the rise as well.
This is so exciting to me, this program, and revolutionary in a way we wish wasn't, right? The idea of allowing people to have agency over their own lives. And I know, Ari, you have so much experience in sort of the development side in Boston, so I'm sure you're aware of this sort of paternalism that Cam mentioned, that I know we have so many conversations about at the A.R.T. But what an exciting program. Thank you so much, Cam, for sharing. And I wonder if, Sarah, maybe we can add some information about that so people can learn more. So that's fantastic. Wondering about looking to the future for both of you, and what's on the horizon for Ari, for Cam, and for Winter Walk and Y2Y.
Yeah, for us, we're really excited to grow our presence here in Greater Boston, and also to think about how we can expand both regionally and nationally. The message is universal. Breaking stigma is necessary. Raising awareness is necessary. Raising money is necessary. And we have been so grateful to this community in Cambridge and Boston and beyond, and we are seeing a real need in other communities. So we're in the process of both reaching a statewide footprint and then hopefully a national footprint. And especially in that last year, as I mentioned, we went virtually and we saw communities from far beyond. I mean, we had walkers in Alaska and in South Korea. And so it was just overwhelming to see, homelessness can happen to anyone. A lot of people have stories that you don't know about. And we've been lucky to get to share that and learn more about that. And so we'll continue amplifying those voices and hopefully grow from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ari.
Yes, in terms of Y2Y, we are at an exciting kind of point in our organizational life cycle. So we're just about to be 6 years old as an organization. And we are in the process, we've been in the process of expanding to our second site, which is located in New Haven, Connecticut. There were some delays to starting that shelter because of the pandemic, but now we've broke ground on construction, so we'll be open by next winter, fall winter time of this year that we're in. And that's really exciting because that's been for a long time. That's been a vision of Y2Y's. In terms of further growth, we are about to enter a strategic planning process this spring that's going to look at our theory of change, which is kind of like the barometer we use to make sure that we're delivering on the outcomes that we say we deliver on, and utilizes our data to measure how we're doing against kind of our vision and mission for our organization. And then we're going to talk about, in the context of the strategic plan, what future growth models could look like. And it's a really interesting and fascinating process because we know that we want to expand the number of youth beds nationally. There are too few beds dedicated directly to young adults experiencing homelessness. So that means that young adults are forced to matriculate through adult shelters where they experience harassment, bullying, and discrimination. And so we know that there's a dedicated need for that, but we also need more spaces that are gender inclusive and affirming for diverse young people experiencing homelessness. A piece of our kind of message as an organization around this part of our work is that it's really important to us to use correct name and pronouns for trans young people in our space. We do not dedicate beds according to gender. There are not gendered areas within our shelter. And we know that that's not just a nice thing to have. So there's a study that was recently released out of the University of Texas at Austin stating that just using a young person's name and pronouns in alignment with their gender can result in 71% fewer symptoms of severe depression and a 65% decrease in suicidal attempts. So part of our role in the national discourse as we see it right now is to help people understand that using correct names and pronouns is a life or death situation. It's not a nice thing to have. And we want to really help other existing shelters and new shelters think about how they can better serve diverse young people who are experiencing homelessness as well.
Thank you, Cam. That's one of those statistics that just knocks you out to hear. So thank you for sharing that. Wondering, before I bring us into the plugs and let people know how they can get involved in your work, wondering if we just look at the future, I would love to know how you both sort of found yourselves in these roles, kind of what your journey was to get here. It can be the long or short version.
I'll give you the short version of mine. But as I said, I had been at the A.R.T. for 10 years. And as I also said, all roads lead to A.R.T. I met the founder of the Winter Walk, who was Paul English, a Boston-born entrepreneur, tech guru, and philanthropist. And I met him actually through work at Oberon. He was in a work phase where he was connecting the tech world and the startup world with the creative community of Greater Boston. And so we were able to connect him to a number of artists from our Oberon universe to create multi-sensory, multimedia events. And then through a few years of work with Paul, he founded this idea. And it was 2016, the fall of 2016, which was a big moment in time in our country. And I personally felt I needed to get involved in something new and interesting to me at that time. And so I broke my heart and left the A.R.T., but started anew in this role. And so I am so thrilled to be a part of it. I think just to add another Oberon A.R.T. plug, that's also how I learned about Y2Y. Wonderful A.R.T. family member, Harvard professor Tim McCarthy actually introduced us to some of the community at Y2Y right as they were opening up. And so we were able to host an event for them at Oberon. And so when we started the Winter Walk, I immediately connected with Y2Y and said, please come join us as part of this. So very exciting times. And it has become my passion, my greatest joy to be a part of this community. I have met the most incredible service providers. I've met the most incredible homeless individuals, both housed and still on the street, doing the most amazing service to their community. And so I'm very grateful.
Yes. And I will say, Ari, you may have left the A.R.T., but your legacy still lives on. It's very strong. Your name is brought up all the time. You are a celebrity at the A.R.T. And Cam, you will be too after this.
Thank you. That's so kind. My journey begins when my parents were both really active in community organizing and really dedicated to racial justice as individuals themselves. And so I was taught a lot about systems and structures of oppression as a very young person. I grew up in a really diverse community, and I was given lots of leadership opportunities as a young person myself. I also had friends as a teenager who were experiencing homelessness. And then as a queer person, had a challenging coming out process, both around my sexual identity and later around my gender. I've been in the nonprofit sector for 16 years, mostly in senior management roles for youth and homeless serving agencies, and kind of always doing racial justice, political organizing and community organizing and kind of youth development work on the side. But then when I found out about Y2Y, I was like, oh, it's like positive youth development, youth to youth, working on this issue that I'm really passionate about. And it kind of felt like if I could have invented a job, it would have been this one. So I, as you know, moved to Boston 2 years ago and have been with Y2Y ever since. And our young people are so amazing. I got to spend a lot of time working overnights in shelter when we first lost access to our young adult staff. And I was almost like, I'm going to quit and just be working in shelter, because that is my favorite part of the work, is getting to be with our young people and getting to work with our young adult leaders as well. They're so passionate, they're so committed, and amazing. So yeah.
Yes, thank you, Cam. And wondering, actually, I was going to ask what your favorite part of the work is. So wondering, Ari, if you have a favorite part. I know you just shared all of the things you're so grateful for.
I think innovation in the field and getting to be directly on the floor with this organization. I mean, the first time I went to Y2Y's shelter space, I was blown away. It is stunning. It's beautiful. It is a space that, I mean, in the way that Cam just said, that a job, if they could create a job, that would be it. If you could create a safe and affirming and beautiful space for young people to feel comfortable and to be lifted out of this cycle of homelessness, it's gorgeous. So check out the website, look at the photos. It doesn't even do it justice. The space is so warm and welcoming. And I think being in these spaces and getting to know these programs is what I love best. I mean, one of our partners, Common Cathedral, is a faith-based organization, but so much more than just church. They are programs and warm space. They have an art program where the most beautiful creations come out. So I think just getting to experience this work is my favorite part.
Yes, I know. And having beautiful, welcoming spaces is another thing that is revolutionary and shouldn't be. And it's so fantastic. So I agree, everyone look at the photos, because I was looking at those and it's so cool and welcoming, and something I think about all the time in my role is how to make our spaces welcoming for everyone and what that looks like. And I'll say my favorite part of my job is also just connecting with people who do wonderful work like this, like the two of you. So wondering if we can switch over to plugs and let people know how they can find your work, get involved right now and in the future.
Yes, well, Winter Walk is this Sunday. And we have had such amazing partners in Winter Walk, and Ari, you've been so incredible. I mean, I just remember, like, even early on in my coming into my role, you always being so warm and kind, and we're so grateful for the partnership with Winter Walk. So it's an amazing event where folks who are close to the work of homelessness and care about folks experiencing homelessness in Boston all come together, and folks experiencing homelessness themselves. We all come together and get to walk together. I like think of it now as like a staple of winter, like winter, it's like a fun winter event for me as well. So we are still collecting kind of folks to walk for Y2Y in Winter Walk, if you are interested in that. So I'll share my contact information after this. You can also follow Y2Y on our social media. Our handle on everything is Y2Y Network, all lowercase, all one word. You could join our email list to get our monthly newsletter and find out other ways to support our work. And then we are also taking winter donations to our shelter, which is at 1 Church Street in Cambridge. Donations can be dropped off any day after 6:30, and we're collecting gloves, hand warmers, socks, coats, kind of all scarves, all winter apparel. So yeah.
Thank you.
Cam already did my plug. The Winter Walk this Sunday. This Sunday, February 13th. No, it's terrific. For those joining in person, we gather on Copley Plaza in the morning. Registration opens at 8:30, the program at 9. We are proud to share that the event is being hosted by Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan from WGBH. Boston's Mayor Wu will be joining us. And as Cam said, it is a fun event. This is a serious issue, but this event is joyful. There is a breakfast we share together. There's coffee and hot chocolate and hand warmers and goodness. And the walk is only 2 miles. And for anyone with mobility issues, the walk is more than just the physical walk. There is activity on the plaza. All of our partners, including Y2Y, are there sharing about their work. There's live music. It's just a terrific day. And for those who are able to join virtually, we'll have an online celebration. We ask you to take a walk or a meaningful moment yourself and join us at 2 p.m. It'll be on our YouTube YouTube channel. You'll find it on our website. Everything's there. And also, as Cam said, you can walk for Y2Y. So as you register or donate, you can share your funds directly with Y2Y. All of our partners receive wonderful funds. Winter Walk matches a lot of the work that these organizations do for their own teams. But we would love you to join us and learn more and celebrate with us. Yes,
thank you. I love that we've got these like collaborative plugs here, right? We never get that. And I'll just supporting everything they said. Please support these organizations. They do wonderful, incredible work. And with Winter Walk, we get so few opportunities to be together in person or even virtually to do something wonderful. So please sign up, support. Sarah's been dropping links like crazy as she does. She's wonderful at that. And uplifting what Sarah just put in the chat, that Team A.R.T is also walking for Y2Y. And if you want to join our team and walk with us, you can register at the link in the chat. Thank you so much, Sarah. So before we go over to Q&A, because we've got some great questions, and I'm going to call in Sarah to help field these because she's much better I am at this. But wondering, Ari and Cam, if there are any last things that you want to highlight or uplift before we go into questions about your work. Or did we do an incredible job?
We did a great job. I think we covered it all. I think, the Winter Walk is more than just a one-day event. It's a year-round experience, as is homelessness. So I encourage you, if none of it works for you to participate Sunday, to just take a minute, go on both of our websites, learn a little more. It makes a difference. Just opening your mind for a moment makes a big difference.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ari and Cam. Now let's open the floor to questions. Can I call you back in, Sarah, to help me?
You most certainly can. This was such an conversation. Apologies for spamming the chat with all of those links, but I think it was super important to get out. And if anyone has questions about any of the links we've shared, you can feel free to contact Team A.R.T. Our contact info is on our website, and I will put my personal email address in the chat as well, so I can redirect you to any resources you might be inquiring after. I do want to reiterate what Julia said and the link that I dropped in the chat. Team A.R.T. is walking for Y2Y, and we would love some new friends. So if you'd like to make a contribution in honor of Y2Y or join us for the walk on Sunday, I promise we're all friendly. We don't bite. We love new friends. So we would highly encourage you to join our team. Very excited to see folks there. And thank you again, Ari and Kim. I just want to lift up some things in the chat. We have some folks thanking you both for joining us, especially so close to this big event, which Ari, I know in particular is, I'm sure there's a lot on your mind right now. So we appreciate both of you giving of your time and energy to join us today. Kicking off a couple questions. We've got some really good ones here, and folks, feel free to keep them coming. We likely won't be able to get to all of them, but we always welcome any new submissions if something tickles your brain as we're speaking. And this is a question for everyone, I think, including you, Julia. In what ways do you feel like the A.R.T., particularly new theater, can be a resource for people experiencing homelessness? Would its aspiration to be a welcoming space for all, whether or not folks are attending an event, be part of this without necessarily becoming a venue for the homeless population?
Thinking about, and I mentioned this a little bit, being a welcoming space for all is probably that's, I think, the driver to me for what community engagement at the A.R.T. should be. And it's a huge part of what we've been talking about in creating the new building, because the A.R.T. will be moving to Alston in a few years, which we're very excited about. Sad to leave Cambridge, of course, but excited for this new home. And we've been thinking so much about what physically can we do so that people feel welcome, not only when they're seeing a show, but something I really think about is how people can feel ownership over the space. My ideal would be that anyone, regardless of background, as long as they adhere to our values, feels like they own the space with us, and they don't need to be, necessarily invited in. They know, oh, the A.R.T., that's my space. And I want everyone across Greater Boston to feel that way. And even before we move into the new space, we're thinking a lot about language, what shows are on our stages, and how we welcome people as they walk into the building. So welcoming people is always sort of my mission and what I love to do. And Ari and Cam will probably be talking to both of you to figure out how we can make our welcoming practices better for the people that you serve. So thank you. Wonderful question, because that's what I think about probably 24/7 besides Stephen.
Yeah, I think this is such a good question that begs another question, which is about the intersection of privilege and access to art, because there is a big intersection between economic privilege and the kind of caliber and type of art that's accessible to people. And so we have just started re-implementing enrichment activities that we had to put on hold due to COVID in the shelter space. So I would love to talk about like how we get some guests to a show. That would be really rad. But yeah.
We should talking to the right person.
I just want to add, first, I see that question is from my old friend, Paul Buttonwieser, who I say hello to. And I think just the only other thing I can add, because I think that's all spot on, is a lot of what we do at the Winter Walk is storytelling. And I'm grateful to have a background in the theater because it helps with that often. But I think if we can't share people's stories, we can't really reach you. I mean, you know, I can tell you the number on the homeless census that happens every year. In January of 2020, it was 6,192 people. And that number is mind-blowing and hard to think about. But when you look at it more deeply and say, that's Luis and Claire and James and Bob and Alex, and we can tell those stories, it changes everything. And so I think the A.R.T, you know, you are my favorite storytellers, but we could also think about that when we think about creating space in the theater around homelessness.
Absolutely.
This is great. Thank you all. That was such a dynamic question. It was really exciting to be able to do it too, Julia. A couple other great cues. So how do you support innovative and affordable housing alternatives? Both of your organizations are themselves so innovative, but the housing scene, particularly in the greater Boston area, I would editorialize, seems so tough, costly, and restrictive to people of average means. So I don't know if that intersects with any of the advocacy work or active work that you all do, but would be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Y2Y expanded in the context of the pandemic into the housing placement and stabilization arena. So we expanded our work through a partnership with the Cambridge Housing Authority to be able to issue lifelong transferable housing vouchers to our guests. And we've been able to place guests into permanent housing and provide both financial stabilization and case management services to them as they get grounded into housing, because a big challenge that is not as talked about with housing placement for folks experiencing homelessness is the culture shock of going from communal living to really isolated kind of living in an apartment when you're used to being outside with your community all day. But the broader issues around housing are very, very structural and endemic in our society. And until there is a really system-wide reckoning with the fact that the trends in cost of housing are not sustainable to create any type of equitable living access for folks of average and means and below, we'll always have housing issues, and we'll always have the need for very specified programs that enable us to place people into housing, because the way the market is operating is not conducive to folks of average means and less accessing housing equitably. So sorry that that's a big answer.
No, wonderful.
Great one.
I think what I'll add is, you know, we are an awareness raiser and we're constantly trying to get into communities and share more information. And I think the idea of getting involved at this bigger level may seem overwhelming, and people step away from questions about affordable housing. So we encourage communities to dig into their own spaces, their own communities, and look at what are the zoning laws, what are these moats we have created around our own towns and cities, and how can we change that? Because affordable housing is not just an issue in Boston proper, we're expanding beyond that. And so we're doing a lot of yes in my backyard work as the Winter Walk. And I think what Cam said about culture shock is not just something that youth experience. I think it's very often that we see that our homeless communities that get to housing still need care. So housing first. Yes, housing is the answer to homelessness, but continued support, permanent supportive housing is the terminology in our world. And that means mental health care, case management, job readiness, simple tasks and needs that a community has when they are housed, and then beyond. So the work doesn't stop just when we get someone under a roof. And so we are working to build more communities aware of that and working on that.
Thank you both. I'm so glad this came up because it's something I think is so wonderful that the two of you work on, which is that continued support and knowing that we all need so much more than just housing, and how important that is for the populations that you work with. So thank you for that question.
I have an editorialized sidebar question to ask of my own, because you brought me back on screen and I'm going to take full advantage of that. I've been reading about a lot is sort of this, I hate to use the term post-COVID because I think we all recognize that we're not living in a post-COVID landscape, but looking at the way that the pendulum is swinging in popular approaches to COVID and other such things, there's a huge boom in the increase of housing costs. Folks who signed leases recently or perhaps earlier in the pandemic at a significantly reduced rate as folks were trying to escape cities are now being forced with renewals at a much higher rate than they can afford. I'm curious if you're seeing any of the cascade effect of that impacting your work or the local populations that you work with.
Yeah, go ahead, Ari.
No, you go, Cam.
I was just going to say, everything that happens in the housing market affects our young people, but our young people are coming into homelessness for the first time out of their teenage years, and often just it's their first experience not living in their foster home or in their family home is that of homelessness. So there's a really high need constantly for housing, for job placement services and employment, and for emergency services for young people experiencing homelessness. And it's kind of this like really complex, broad ecosystem between the housing market and, the economy that all always ultimately affect, particularly our young people living at the most possible intersections of oppression, probably within our society. And so the answer is yes, but we just constantly see a high need. So often things will happen where folks will ask, like, has this caused a increase in the needs for services? And it's like, yes, and the need is always high.
I think that would be the same answer. The answer was yes, and also the need is always high. Dead on. I think, we've seen some really great work recently in terms of eviction moratoriums and people focusing on that. We've seen some innovation in terms of low threshold housing, especially with the crisis going on in our area down on Mass and Cass. So the need is great. The need continues to be great. The need will always be great. But we're seeing, committed leadership and some change. And so that is a good sign, I hope.
Absolutely. Thank you. A couple more cues in here. I think we touched on this one a little bit earlier, but it is a very important question. So I would like to pose it, have an opportunity to pose it and maybe expand on what was already said. This person is saying that they're extremely inspired by your respective passions for your work. So what drew you to your work and who else do you admire in your field? I also just want to lift up this last part. Thank you so much for all you do and for being here today.
I admire Cameron Van Fossen.
Me too.
I think the leaders of all of our partner organizations are where I would put my trust and thanks and love and support. I think, these committed individuals are so powerful in their work. And I mean, Dr. Jim O'Connell at Healthcare for the Homeless, who I already mentioned, is, we all think he's the bee's knees, and so learning from these people who have spent so many years in the field and who do the work every day, just getting to know, Andy McCauley at New England Center and Home for Veterans. And there's just these incredible luminaries of this work that I would say, go on all the websites and learn about all of these leaders.
I would echo Ari in terms of just being inspired by the work of Winter Walk, the work of the partner agencies of Winter Walk, but really personally who I admire in the work, and my motivation is our young people. I don't think anybody is as resilient. I don't think anybody is as brilliant. I don't think anybody is just as amazing as our young people. So they are the people that I admire most in this work. And I just think are like such gems in terms of the way they are able to navigate everything that they face on a day-to-day basis. Related
to that, Kim, I believe you said earlier that Y2Y is the only youth-led, youth-specific shelter in Massachusetts. What happens to someone, to a person who is young and experiencing homelessness, who is not able to access Y2Y? What would their typical experience be like? Why is it so important to have youth-centered and youth-led facilities for young homeless folks?
Oh, that's such a good question. So one of the questions that we ask our guests when they leave Y2Y is like, if you hadn't been here, where would you have been? And for some folks, it's like sleeping on a friend's couch for a while. So we've had guests who came to Y2Y from literally like sleeping in common areas of a dorm at their school and moving from common area to common area as security kind of finds them. Folks who literally just are sleeping outside. And, I think there are folks who choose to matriculate through adult shelters. So once you're 18, you can enter an adult shelter, and that's the age range we serve, 18 to 24. But what's unique about our work is that we recognize that young people of that same age range who come from more privileged backgrounds matriculate through institutions designed by society to acknowledge the unique stage of brain development and stage of life that they're at. Colleges often espouse being extensions of parental units and seeing themselves as having that structural role in the lives of young adults who matriculate through their institutions. So our take on it is really like, our young people deserve that too. And young people experiencing homelessness, as I mentioned, are not only experiencing, they're experiencing culture shock of becoming homeless because they're so young and they're not yet chronically homeless. And we have a really unique intervention point to be able to exit them from the cycle so they don't remain homeless for 10, 20, and 30 years and become those chronically homeless folks. But it's a very, very risky time in their lives. There's a high risk of being exploited. They're desperate economically, and that can lead to dangerous situations for them. So it's just a really important intervention period. And also, as Ari so kindly mentioned earlier, our physical space is really designed to be kind of like de-institutionalized or anti-carceral, I think is the way I'd describe it. Like, we do not want it to feel like you are getting wanded when you walk through the door, and it's very like institutional in terms of the space. We want it to feel like a dorm. We want it to feel like it was designed for young adults ages 18 to 24. That's why there's murals and color and art and bunk beds and, and things like that. Because we believe really deeply that these young people deserve the very best experience that they can be given in the context of what they're going through. I hope I answered your question. I feel like I just rambled, but sorry.
Not ramble. No, that was incredible. And it's so important, I think, to hear about the specific, really, really concentrated work that y'all are doing in that framework. It's so interesting. I hope I have one day the opportunity to see the Y2Y space. I've only seen photos. It looks beautiful. I would also like to add, I think to my knowledge that your space is a space that A.R.T. formerly used as a rehearsal space. So another connection that our organizations share, shared space in the literal physical sense. But this has been incredible. We are at the hour, which I literally can never believe how quickly these things go. So Julia, I want to give you an opportunity to close us out. I just want to reiterate to everyone who is still watching, awesome links in the chat. Join Team A.R.T. to walk in honor of Y2Y for the Winter Walk. It's this Sunday, bundle up. We're going to have a blast. If you have any questions about that, I'm going to pop my email address into the chat as well. Feel free to reach out directly to me, and I'd be happy to direct you to the appropriate channel or answer questions that I can answer. Julia, over to you. Thank you, friends, for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, Ari and Cam. This felt like just a fun, wonderful conversation, but it's also, I just feel incredibly moved to get to share space with the two of you because you do such important work and you do it so humbly, which I find the best people always are. But I'm so grateful, and everyone watching, please look at all the links. Tell everyone in your communities about this work. It's so important, and we need everyone to get involved and follow these wonderful community leaders that I can't believe I got to just spend an hour chatting with. I am so lucky. Thank you both so much. And thank you everyone watching. Please, like I said, learn more about Y2Y and Winter Walk and Ari and Cam. Thank you all so much. Any last words, Ari and Cam?
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ari. It's been awesome to be with all of you.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
This is the best. Have a good day, everyone. And we will see you this Sunday, the 13th at the Winter Walk. Bye.
Bye.